Hello and welcome back to the Yoga Well podcast. I'm Chase Bossart. I'm the executive director of the Yoga Well Institute. I was a long time personal student of Mr. TKV Deshikachar. And today we're going to talk about definitions of the word yoga. So I think one of the biggest problems of yoga is that it's difficult to explain. It's like trying to explain a taste or what the experience of a dance was, or, what you felt when you were listening to a piece of music, etc. All of those things, cooking, dance, music, they are experiential knowledge systems. So, yes, you can talk about scales. Yes, you can talk about spices. Yes, you can talk about movements, etc. But at the end of the day, it's the performance that makes the thing what it is. And that performative element is very hard to capture in language. In many regards, that multiplicity of experiences is a fantastic attribute. It allows people to engage at a very personal level and to find something that works for them and that provides an authentic and easy entry point for them. So, in many ways, this multiplicity of what yoga is and all the different ways that all the different experiences that yoga offers is really a huge asset. The complication of that is it can sometimes be difficult to see, well, what are the directions within yoga as a practice? It's kind of like you can cook so many different dishes, and you can practice on the grill, or you can practice with your crepes, or you can, there's so many different things you can work on in your cooking that when you come to cooking, it's hard to know, well, what should I study first? And what is it that I should learn first? And what is an advanced practice of this? Is it just cooking complicated dishes? And this is the thing that happens with yoga. People find the physical practice of yoga first, by and large. It's actually not what happened for me. I found the philosophical, meditative aspects of it first, and then the physical aspects of it. But that's just the point being that you can enter the praxis of yoga in so many different places. So what happens for a lot of yogis is that the context of practice, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? What is advanced practice versus beginning practice, etc.? They never find it because they get in and they start doing something and they do some things that work for them, and it alleviates their pain, or it strengthens their back, or it gives them energy for the day and clarity for making decisions, etc. And that is as far as it takes them. And that's a very legitimate use of yoga. It's a very legitimate pursuit of yoga. And over the couple thousand years of serious yoga practice, that since its inception in India, there has developed a quite in-depth discussion about what is yoga, what is the meaning of yoga, What does it accomplish? What can it be used to accomplish? And how do we think about what its goals and purposes are? And by and large, this discussion has been happening in Indian languages, the subcontinent of India, which includes present-day Afghanistan and Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. And it is enshrined in texts. Many of them are in Sanskrit. So there's a little bit of a barrier to entry to this ongoing discussion about what is yoga and what is the purpose of yoga and what are we doing. And I think that it's a little bit challenging to articulate without the experiences. A typical way that yoga has traditionally worked is you went and lived with the teacher's family, and as part of that, you had to do your daily ritual, your daily practice, and you also had to participate in the teacher's family. So you had chores you had to do, you ate with them, all of those things. So the teacher got to know you very well, and the classes started out with your personal development and your personal practices. And it was only after there has been some attainments and some experiences within the practice that explanations for what is going on are given. I don't think that system is going to work in the West, largely because it's already out of the box. It's already out of the box. There's so many group classes. People are going to the classes that work for them, and in many ways, that self-selecting of a physical class is not actually delivering the long-term utility of what is needed. So, for instance, if you look, there are definitely stereotypes of who goes to what kind of class. So, if we look at the vinyasa flow, the power flow classes, etc., there's a certain kind of practitioner in there. And then if you look at restorative or, maybe yin yoga, something like that, there's another different kind of practitioner in there. I like to joke that actually what people need is the exact opposite of what they're personally choosing. And so it would be most useful if people went to a class that was labeled power flow vinyasa, and it actually was a restorative class. Of course, that will only work for about 5 minutes when everybody gets up and leaves. So it's not a realistic solution, but the principle of it is what I'm trying to convey. In order to understand what are the goals of yoga, what is it that we hope will accomplish through the practice of it, I thought it would be useful to look at some of the definitions of yoga. And when we look at the definitions of yoga, I'm not trying to pin down what it is. Rather, I'm trying to tease out what are the values, what are the principles that yoga is espousing. Because if we know what the principles are, we know what its values are, then we can make decisions about how to practice in whatever stage of practice we're in. So I'm going to present a bunch of definitions here. These are all definitions from various texts. At the end, I have a few definitions from my teacher and from his teacher. So we'll start with that. So first of all, the word yoga is derived from the verb root yuj, Y-U-J. If you are listening to this on the podcast, you can, we will put into the show notes a handout with different definitions of yoga on it. But if you are looking at this on YouTube, I'll just have the definitions up on the screen so you can see them. So the root yuj, Y-U-J, in the process of becoming a noun stem, the U gets strengthened by adding an A, and the J becomes strengthened, and in doing that, it moves from a voiced to a voiceless, and in that happening, it becomes yoga. Huge becomes yoga. So what is the meaning of the root of the word yoga? It's huge. So now, huge has several different meanings. One is to yoke, or to join together, like you fasten or you harness a horse to a chariot, something like that. If we look in the dictionary, huge, it says to make ready, to prepare, to use, to employ. It's to put arrows on a bowstring, so to insert, etc. To turn or direct or fix or concentrate the mind. So, and the last one is to unite, to connect, to bring together. So, huge, you can bring these into two different channels. One of them is the meaning is connecting, bringing together, linking. And the other one is harnessing, so that you can make ready or you can direct it, etc. In Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, in the first sutra, in the commentary on it, there is a statement, yogaha samadhihi, which means yoga is samadhi. Now, that is a useful definition in and of itself, but we'll come back to that in a minute. The purpose of saying that in the commentary is to highlight that in the case of Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the meaning of the word yoga is not union, it's not linking, it's harnessing, it's concentrating, it's directing. So when we think of yoga and we think of this root of the word yuj, to yoke, to harness, what we should be thinking of is yoga is a set of techniques that is useful for harnessing the mind. The purpose of yoga is that its utility is it can direct the mind. So through the practice of yoga, what is attained is the capacity to influence the directionality of the mind. Where does your mind go? What does it take up? And whatnot. So if we go to the first definition of yoga I like to talk about, which is in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, which is yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. What that literally means is yoga is the nirodha of the activity of the mind. Yoga is the nirodha of the activity of the mind. So we have to know, what is nirodha. So nirodha also means a number of things. Those are, we can generalize and say that nirodha means to restrain, to contain. So when you say that yoga is the restraint of the activities of the mind, then we have a pretty nice definition of yoga. The question will be, what does that mean, to restrain the activities of the mind? That will be the question. And this is why I was saying earlier that I don't want to give definitions of yoga so much as I want to tease out the values and the principles that are implicit in the definition. So in this definition, what you get is there is some kind of intentional restraint of mental activities. All right. Now, on a practical level, in the beginning, the restraint that is necessary is keeping the mind from wandering. So in the beginning of practice, what is the chitta vritti nirodha? What does that mean? It means to stop the mind from wandering. This is so in line with the harnessing or the yoking that is the root of the word yoga, right? So the practice of yoga in the beginning is becoming aware of the movements of the mind and then watching what they're doing. And when the movements start to move away from the topic, to bring it back to the topic. And, I think that this is also an important thing. There is a misconception in yoga that yoga is about cessation of the mind or about the complete stopping of the mind. So Patanjali uses a word for cessation later in the text, and that word is nivritti. For instance, he uses it in chapter 4, number 25, when he's described someone who has had very high level experiences, then there is the cessation of the desire of becoming the soul. Right? So it's like there's some satisfaction, there's some peace that blossoms in the person, and their ache for spiritual experience, etc., is soothed. Right? So there is a stopping of that ache. Now, when Patanjali talks about the definition of yoga, he does not use the word nivritti. He does not use the word cessation. He uses the word restraint. If we think about, okay, the beginning is keeping the mind from wandering, then what's the advanced? Okay, what is the advanced? Well, the advanced is that the restraint on the mind becomes such that you can maintain one pointed concentration. And in that one pointed concentration, there are a series of experiences. They're described in the 3rd chapter. One pointed concentration is called dharana. It's called the holding of attention. Then, when that is continuous, there is the possibility of dhyanam, which is the arising of insight. And then there is another step beyond that, which is samadhi, which, as we saw a moment ago, is one of the definitions of yoga. Yoga is samadhi. And what is samadhi? Samadhi is a transcendence of identity. It is not that the mind ceases at that moment. It's rather that the awareness that I am observing ceases, and there is a transcendence of identity. When you come back from samadhi, it's a little bit like you have woken up. If you think about it in the morning, like when you first wake up, like, boom, there you are. Whoa, well, where was I? Well, I was sleeping, right? I know that I was sleeping. So why don't I remember anything from when I was sleeping? I just want to specify this is not when I'm dreaming, etc. This is a dreamless sleep, etc. Awake from dreamless sleep. Well, the thing that is sleeping is the identity. Actually, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, sleep is defined as the cessation of activity based on a predominance of tamas, which is a particular quality of heaviness or inactivity. So in that case, you can say that there's a ceasing of mental activity that is related to heaviness. Now, in samadhi, the description of the mind, and in fact, many places in the text, Patanjali actually uses the word sattva instead of mind. So he's using sattva as a synonym of mind. In the highest states, like samadhi, etc., the mind becomes completely sattvic. And at that moment, the awareness of my identities, etc., are transcended. And this is the complete restraint of the mind that Patanjali is indicating in the beginning when he says yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. So the brilliance of his definition is that he has chosen words that apply to every stage of the practitioner. What is the value? Well, our values in yoga have to do with directing the mind. And depending upon the level of you as a practitioner, it can be, well, I'm just trying to stop my mind from wandering, all the way to I can be completely attentive on something I have chosen to be attentive to continuously, or it can be this complete sattvification of the mind to the point where there is a transcendence. Right? Now, as proof that there is not a cessation of mind, when you come back from samadhi, there is a lingering taste that is very positive and useful, etc., like this. Okay, so in terms of looking at what is yoga and the definition of yoga, first thing we looked at was the root of yoga is to harness or to yoke, and yoke is about attaining influence over something that you may direct its activities and its motions in a way that you are not able to do without that apparatus. So, in a horse and a cart, you have the yoke. In yoga, you have yoga techniques. All right, so then I want to look at the next sutra, which is Tada Drashtuhu Svarupe Avasthanam. Tada Drashtuhu Svarupe Avasthanam. So, Tada means then. It's very clear he's indicating as a result of the restraint of mental activities, this is what happens. So, avasthanam. So, the word avasthanam is the stem, the main stem is sta, to remain, or to stand, to stay. Ava is dropping down into. So, and the suffix ana is ing. So it's as though you are residing down. You're staying down in. In what? Svarupe is locative singular. It's indicating what you are residing down in. Own nature. Svarupe, own nature, or own form. Then, who is doing that? Trashtuhu. So, of the seer. So it is the establishing or the residing of the seer in its own nature. This is the result of the practice of yoga. Grammatically, it's pretty straightforward, but the question will then be, well, what the hell does that mean? Residing in your own nature, or the seer residing in its own nature. What does that mean? Patanjali here has used the word drashtu in a very specific manner. Drashtu it comes from the root drish, meaning to see. So, another way of understanding drashtuhu is perceiver, or the experiencer. So, then the establishing of the experiencer, of the seer in its own nature. So what is the result of the restraint of mental activities? Is that the seer becomes established in its own nature. What is the nature of the seer? Very clearly, the nature of the seer is seeing, experiencing. So what is the result of the restraint of mental activities? Is better seeing. Another way to say it, clarity, right? Clarity. So what happens in the beginning of yoga practice? As we get better at preventing the mind from wandering, we have a more and more clarity. I think all of us can resonate with that, right? We all have that experience as a result of our yoga. It's a big part of why we keep practicing. Then we can think about, well, what does the establishing or residing of the seer in its own nature mean in intermediate or in high-level practice? So it means that the seer has come back into its self. There's a returning to ourselves. So another way of saying this is we become more authentically us. We become more authentically us. And at the highest level, that is, spirit is what is operating our system. I am no longer the operator. Spirit is the operator. Right? So what you can see here is that there is something that you do, and then there's the result. That pairing happens again and again and again in yoga. There is the do this, and this is the result. And part of what happens as the confusion in our society about what is yoga is that all of it gets called yoga. So when you reside in your authenticity, when you reside in yourself, there's a lot of peace that's there. So what is yoga? Well, yoga is peace. P-E-A-C-E, just for the record. There's a lot of peace. So what do we say yoga is? You can say yoga is peace. That is true. And how do we get there? What do we do to arrive there, or to encourage its arising. Now, I like to move to the Bhagavad Gita. And in Bhagavad Gita, there are multiple famous shlokas, but I have chosen 3 of them. 2 from the 2nd chapter, 1 from the 6th chapter. So in the 2nd chapter, which is the chapter in which Krishna is just starting to teach Arjuna, and he starts off with an intellectual exercise. He says to Arjuna, the reason that you are suffering is because you have avidya. You have not understood, in Arjuna's case, it's life and death. What is the soul and what is the body, etc. And it doesn't work. Arjuna does not respond. And then he says to Arjuna, you have a duty. You're a warrior. And he doesn't respond to that either. So he tries a different tack, and he starts describing there is a state where when you're in that state, here's the things that happen. And this description ends up piquing Arjuna's curiosity, and he wakes up and he starts asking some questions. So now the dialogue between the teacher and the student can begin. So in this description of what is the state of yoga, one of the things that Krishna says is samatvam yogaha uchyate. Yoga uchyate is called samatvam. Samatvam means evenness. Another way a little bit easier way to understand it in English is equanimity. What is yoga? Yoga is equanimity. So I just said that there are 2 halves of the definitions of yoga. One is the doing part, and the other is the results part. So this is the results part. What happens as a result of your practice of yoga is that there should be the ever-increasing feelings and behaviors of equanimity. A person becomes less and less influenced by the highs and lows of life. And you see this. It happens in lots and lots and lots of people. But it also gives you a measure that you can start to think about your practice. Is this working? Is this improving my equanimity? Because if yoga is making you more dramatic, or is making you more volatile, etc., your yoga might not be serving you. You might need some kind of change in the methodology of how you're practicing. A second, just 2 shlokas later, this is in 2nd chapter, number 50, he says, Yogaha karmasu kaushalam. Yoga is skillfulness, kaushalam, in actions, plural. Karmasu, it's plural. So again, this is another result. What happens as a result of yoga is that we become skillful in our actions. That means that, when my daughter says something to me, etc., I don't react. I respond. Or, when you're with the client and something happens that's, difficult or challenging or whatever, you're able to navigate the situation skillfully. Well, you don't blow up, you don't lose your cool, you don't get stuck, etc. You just, okay. So how about this, or how about that, or let's reconvene in next Tuesday, and I'll have a solution for you by then. Or so what we see is that when we're doing yoga, the result is in our real life. And what is the real life? There's increased equanimity and there is increased capacity. Now, also in the Bhagavad Gita in chapter 6, number 23, he says, Dukkha samyoga viyoga yoga sannitam. So yoga, again, is being defined. Samnityam is known. Yoga is known as viyoga. So we saw earlier that yoga is about linking, or union is one of the possible definitions of the root yoga. When you add the prefix V, to yoga as linking, what you get is unlinking, or disconnecting. So yoga is known as the disconnection of samyoga, of your connection. Samyoga here is the same stem yoga, but it's a different prefix, sam, which means complete, or very well, the complete union, or the very well connected. So yoga is known as the disconnecting of your connection with dukkha, with suffering. So yoga is the disconnecting of your connection with suffering. Now, yoga does not say bad things will never happen in your life. Yoga does not say that people that you love dearly will no longer be in your life. In fact, that's just a fact of being alive. But what it does say is that the suffering that arises from events, or from things happening, can be less, and even completely relinquished. So again, this is another result of the practice of yoga. What is yoga? It's the result of yoga is that I'm not so connected to my sufferings anymore. Okay, the divorce was 10 years ago, and man, that was really hard, and I've been carrying that with me for the past 8 years. But somehow in the last 2 years, I've been able to get over it. And yes, I didn't like it, and yes, it was painful, and but now I am where I am. And oh yes, I started yoga 2 years ago. How interesting. Or just fill in the blank with such and such event happened, and it held me for a long time. Now I've managed to digest it, etc. Another definition of yoga from a Hakta text called the Yoga Yajnavalkya, from the first chapter, number 43, he says, Samyogo yoga ityukto jivatma paramatmanoho. So what is this? Yoga yukto is said, iti, thus. Yoga is said to be this. The connection, the samyoga, the complete connection of the jivatma, of the individual soul, with the paramatma, with the great soul, the individual spirit with the great soul. So again, another result of yoga. What happens with yoga? Yoga is a spiritual pursuit. It doesn't have to be. It can be a completely material pursuit. But what yoga does is it brings us back into ourselves. as we saw earlier, tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam, then the establishing of the seer in its own nature. So it brings us back into ourselves. And as part of that, it opens us to that which is beyond ourselves. It opens us to the very foundations of life and of being. And it gives meaning to life by making life an expression of something divine. So this is, again, a result of yoga, right? So we should look to see, like, what are some other possible definitions that help us to know what we're doing in yoga. And for those, I'm going to turn to a 7th century Sanskrit thesaurus called the Amara Kosha. So Amara Kosha, so the kosha means a bag, and Amara means nectar. So Amara Kosha is a bag of nectar. And this thesaurus is still in use in a major way in Sanskrit circles today. If you take traditional Sanskrit classes, then you will be asked to memorize this thesaurus. And of course, there's a rhythm and a chant that goes with it, and so that helps a lot. But doing it, memorizing it, is so useful because then all the words are just there. Okay, so here are 5 synonyms for the word yoga. First one I want to talk about is sannahana. Sannahana means preparation or protection. So it's making oneself ready, preparing. So anytime you do something, it's worth doing well. If it's not worth doing well, why are you doing it? So if it's going to be doing well, then it's useful to have a little preparation for it. Yoga changes your state. It improves your capacity. Therefore, you become skillful in actions. You have equanimity, allows you to be more present and focused in what you're doing. Why should you practice every day? Because it's a preparation for the day. It's a protection for the day. It's going to put you on a foundation where you can function at the best level for you, or a better level for you. That will make everything go better. Second word that's given in this thesaurus is upaya. Upaya means a tool or a means or an expedient of any kind. Just reading the dictionary. That by which one reaches one's aims. So another way of thinking about that is an upaya is a tool. Actually, the word is very interesting. Aya is to move, and upa is close, near. So upaya is to move near. What does a tool do? It moves you nearer your outcome. It allows you to do what you could not do before. Yoga allows you to do what you could not do before. That could be touch your toes. That could be turn your head to look behind when you're backing up your car. That could be having the strength to walk up the stairs, etc. It can also be things like, because of yoga, I have developed the capacity to say no. I have developed good boundaries. Or I have improved my communication a lot. I had a meeting with a student just a couple of days ago in which they were explaining how they saw that in the interaction with their partner, that they were not communicating their needs. They came back from a grocery shopping, and they had all these bags, and they put them in the kitchen, and they were going to put them away, and then the partner came in and was like doing something else in the kitchen, and that was really getting in the way, and was trying to ask my student for their opinion, and da 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 da, and my student recognized, oh, I'm really getting aggravated here, and stopped and said, I'm sorry. I know you have this need for me right now, but I can't be present for you. Can you please let me put away everything in the kitchen first, and then I can be present for you? And they said, okay, and continued doing the thing in the kitchen, and my student said, would you mind doing that in the other room? And then once I'm finished here, then I'll come and find you. Okay, talk about an upaya, right? It has allowed my student to come into observance of what it is that is happening real time in their body, and to communicate about that in a way that solves the problem. Yoga is an upaya, a tool. You can also say that something like breathing and moving and coordinating the movements with the breath, what that does is it improves our ability to focus. So by coordinating breath, movement to breath, we make the breathing more tangible and easier to lengthen. And as we lengthen our breathing and whatnot, then there's a change in our state and the mind becomes more directable. Yoga is a tool. It is the means by which we influence the way our system is functioning. In many ways, it's useful to think of yoga as a science of experience. You choose what you are linking with. That what you link with causes an experience to arise. The arising of that experience changes you, either because of the qualities that are within it or how it asks your system to function. That changing of the way your system functions provides a foundation for experiencing, and that applies to what's going on right now and also to what is happening later on in the day. Yoga is an upaya. We can also say yoga is dhyanam. This is the third synonym that's given by the Amara Kosha. Dhyanam is meditation. So somehow in the West, yoga has come to mean physical exercise, or in some cases it means spirituality because there's people in robes, etc. But actually, if you see what is a foundational way of thinking about yoga, yoga is meditation. How do we define meditation? Intentionally directing the mind to a specific place and keeping it there, not static. There will be some movements, but it will remain with the focus. This is meditation. That's what we've been saying is the core value of Yuj, the root of yoga. It's the means by which we can harness harness the mind so that we can direct it where we would like it to go and keep it from taking us all these places that are not helpful for us. Dhyanam is the same idea. You are intentionally putting your attention on something that you're curious about, or that linking with will be useful for you. And it's also just showing that, traditionally yoga has been about the mind. There is a chant that goes, Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakerotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi. So this is the invocation from the Nyaya Vartika of King Bhoja, and it says, I honor Patanjali, who is the source of Ayurveda for removing impurities of body, and the source of grammar for removing impurities of communication, and of yoga for removing impurities of mind. So somehow yoga has become about the body in the West, but actually from a foundational perspective, yoga has always been about the mind. Of course, the mind is in body, and body is very important, and breathing is very important, and all of those things. But the function is not just to become more and more flexible or to become more and more strong. The function is to direct the mind, learn to harness the mind so that you can be more and more present in your life. And being more and more present in your life results in more clarity, more skillfulness in your relationships, more equanimity, more peace in your feelings. I'm going to do two more synonyms and then we'll wrap it up. So the fourth synonym is in the Amarakosha is Sangati. Sangati. Gati means to go, and Sang is very well. So Sangati is to go together very well. It's the meaning of linking, or as many people put it, union. And this is a legitimate definition of yoga, but it kind of misses the mark, right? Union is something that is a result of yoga. It's not, let me put it this way. Yoga is intentional linking, right? Where you put your attention matters. Where you put your attention causes feelings and thoughts and whatnot to arise, and those things impact you and affect you. So when I think of Sangati, I think of yoga as a system of intentional linking. And some of the results are, it's the union of the individual spirit with the great soul, or with the foundational spirit, etc., like this. So union is a legitimate translation of yoga. I don't think it captures as well as in practical terms as the directing of the mind or the restraint of mental activities, etc. All right, last one is yukti. Yukti is synonym number 5, and yukti means skillful adaptation. So, what is yoga? Yoga is the ability to respond in a way that is appropriate and effective. It's skillful. And you see this happening in your life. The more yoga is working on you in the ways it's intended, the more that you become present, and the more that you have clarity and are authentic and able to navigate situations with skill. It's an amazing practice. And I think it's also it's useful to understand the values that have been articulated over the centuries. There's lots more definitions. Maybe we'll do another version of this podcast where we take a second group of definitions and look at them. And the point of it is to understand what are its values so that we can understand how we should practice, and we can evaluate whether the practice I'm doing is working for me or not in these ways. Thank you for listening. I'll do a little bit of chanting to close. Kayena vacha manasendriyaiva buddhyatmana va prakrite subhavat karodmi yadyat sakalam parasmai Narayanaayeti samarpayami sarvam Shri Krishnarpanamastu. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you again soon.